I'm just doing a recording to get us kicked off for the very first GETCO2 Hackathon. There may be more in our future. And we call this a welcome hack pack. So I'm just going to share some slides and work through to give you a bit of an introduction of what you're going to experience in the hackathon. And hopefully this will help your teams sort of organize themselves and get started. Just need to share my screen and share full screen. And hopefully you can still see my face, and hopefully you can see the slides there as we record this. So welcome. This is the Hack Pack. This is a little bit of a, I guess, hopefully a taste about what you're going to experience over the next 3 months, all of course culminating in the grand finale where our 5 brilliant teams from across Australia will be presenting their pitches in front of a big audience. There'll be lots of prizes, there'll be lots of noise, and hopefully lots of celebrations when we get to the end of this. And I really want to thank everybody who has signed up for engaging in what I think should be quite a valuable experience. Before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge country, the University of Queensland and GETCO2 acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. And of course, we recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. I will give you one example. I'll be talking through several examples of translation and innovation that I've had the privilege of being involved with. One of those has involved engaging and cooperating heavily with traditional owners and Indigenous corporations, and we have translated some traditional knowledge collaboratively into a medical device startup company. It's really the first example of this kind of cooperation with traditional owners and traditional knowledge. So we'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. GETCO2 also, of course, has a commitment to diversity and inclusion. And what an example a hackathon is. It's a mandate of ours to bring together different types of people and thinkers, and diversity and inclusion is a massive part of that. So I would like to express my proactive commitment to supporting efforts for greater diversity and inclusion within our centre. We have an immensely diverse centre and a lot of different types of thinkers, and we have to bring those minds together to solve difficult problems in CO2 conversion. And this diversity of thought and perspectives definitely contributes to creativity and innovation. And I'm going to speak to innovation and what that really means as we work through this hack pack and solve these difficult problems. We celebrate and are enriched by the differences in all that we do, and together with all of you, we're building a team that is underpinned by respect, inclusion, and equality. A bit of an overview. I would like to introduce the hackathon team, some faces that you will be seeing a bit of as we work through this curriculum over the next 3 months. Talk generally about why are we here? What is a hackathon? What might be the possibilities? Where might we end up once we come out the other side of this? I have a few personal translational experiences and some reflections. I've been doing some reflection, and hopefully some of those insights, I'll just really be sharing them transparently and honestly with you. One of those reflections is when I was a PhD student and early career researcher, I wish I had been exposed to things like hackathons and accelerators, because I can honestly say that would have saved the investors who invested mine and my team's inventions, could have saved a lot of money and a lot of time. And I think we could have been a lot more efficient in the way that we arrived at the outcomes at the other end, and maybe been more successful. So it's one of the reasons I'm very passionate, and the team working on this are very passionate about making sure that you have access to these sorts of experiences. Talk a bit about we're calling it a curriculum. some of the resources available to you, and of course, how are we going to assess you? It's not all about winning, but I think giving you an insight into what the judges are going to be looking for at the end of the hackathon is really important, so that you know where we're heading. A bit about expectations, including there will be a bit of homework in this course, and I think it's true to say that the hackathon teams and individuals will you'll get more out of this than you put in. The more you put in, the more you will get out. So we'll talk a bit about homework. We're going to be assigning mentors. We have 5 brilliant mentors with tons of industry experience in that chemical engineering net zero space. So we will be assigning mentors to your teams today. I have 5 little crunched up pieces of paper that I'm going to draw and assign 5 mentors to the 5 teams right here today. And I'll finish with acknowledgements. Little bit about me. I am the chair of GetCO2's engagement and partnerships portfolio. So that's all about engaging with public, engaging with government, engaging with future business partnerships, engaging with stakeholders that over the course of GetCO2's lifetime can help us have impact, do translation, and of course, undertake innovation. And again, I'm going to tell you what innovation really means as we move through this slide deck. I'm a materials engineer. I have always had a very strong passion for innovation. I got involved in science and engineering so that I could make a difference. And in my whole career, which is 35 years working on new materials, I've always tried to get our ideas protected and engaged heavily with industry over that time, and not always succeeded, but really tried to get our technologies out of academia and into industry. And I really enjoy that process. It's not easy, but it's part of my DNA. So I guess that's why I'm here having a conversation with you. Impacts that myself and my team have spanned health, a lot of biomedical device materials, sustainability, and even social empowerment. I mentioned that Indigenous partnership with Tugulungi Aboriginal Corporation, which is still going in the form of a medical device startup company today. These days, a bigger priority for me, I'm heading into my mid-50s, and with the experiences I've had, I really enjoy mentoring the next generation of young entrepreneurial academics, and that's a real joy. My partner in the engagement and partnerships portfolio, Christian from Adelaide, I think we're kindred spirits. Christian has also translated his research into practical solutions, has always engaged with industry and industry partners. And I think beyond the, as Christian says here, beyond the measurable impacts of these projects, he finds it very professionally rewarding to focus on research that also aligns with a commitment to a more sustainable future. So like me, Christian is very passionate about innovation and translation. And like me, he's also very eager to step in. So Christian and I will be kind of co-chairing the curricular sessions sprinkled throughout the next 3 months. And we have a power-packed lineup of speakers who are just going to come and share their wisdom, thought leaders in this translational space. And hopefully when you listen to these people speak, and you'll glean something from every single one of them and come out the other side equipped to engage with industry and to feel more confident taking your scientific discovery towards real-world application. So why are we here? Last year at our annual conference, we kind of had a vote with the GetCO2 people, and one of the outcomes was that we really should run a hackathon in 2025. So that's part of the reason why we're here. Whether we want to call it a hackathon or whether it's more appropriate to call it something else, it doesn't matter. Hackathons, to tell you the truth, were really born out of the software sector, and they typically run for a couple of very intensive days, like a boot camp. For engineering problems, we need a little bit more time. Our problems are, I think, somewhat more complex. So this hackathon, after a lot of work by a lot of people and a lot of conversation, is really tailored for GETCO2. And I think probably could be considered more of an ideas incubator and a networking event to get the fabric of our centre connected across all of our different nodes and to get people cooperating. It's a big mandate for ARC Centres of Excellence to really get that 1 + 1 = 3. And one way to do that is to connect people across states, nodes, and territories, and that's part of a big reason why we're doing the hackathon. Another big reason is it aligns with many of our very serious GETCO2 key performance indicators, which I'll share on the next slide. We think a hackathon is a great way to promote what I call here multi-vector networks, as mentioned, and innovation in capital letters. I'm going to define what innovation means in a second. And the last one is probably the most important one. We're going to get together and have fun. I really think that the final pitch session and the awards that go along with it are going to be an absolute hoot. And if we all take that mindset into the hackathon, being positive, enjoying the process, and I guarantee you, whatever your idea, your concept is at the beginning, it will not be the same by the time you get to the end. You're going to have the wisdom of your mentors. You're going to have the wisdom of all of the speakers coming in. And we'll be diving into really cool tools like business model canvas and value proposition canvas. And you'll be doing a bit of reading and learning how to use these tools. When you come out the other end, it'll be a little bit different to where you finish will be different to where you began. And that will be a good thing. I mentioned key performance indicators for GETCO2, and these are kind of our translational ones. And I'm not going to read through them in detail, but of course, one expectation is that we will protect our ideas, our intellectual property, and you can see the numbers there as we progress through this year and next year. Joint publications that straddle all of our 7 nodes between our researchers. You can see that's a pretty big number there in 2025 and 2026. We're going to give awards and prizes for innovation and impact. Workshops and conferences. We can call this hackathon a workshop, I think. And of course, we'll be giving our pitches at the final year conference in Sydney on the beautiful northern beaches. Training courses, presentations, briefings. I think some of the outcomes of this hackathon will be distilled and communicated to people like industry partners, public. Maybe some of our pitches will make their way into the public, government, policy, and of course, industry. So this is part of the roadmap. This is part of the fabric of our centre to get us closer to taking our ideas out and scaling them up. Maybe ending up in a small pilot facility that we can bring industry stakeholders and government in and show them how this is going to look. New industry and academic partnerships and projects. Technologies at TRL. You may not have heard the acronym TRL. It means Technology Readiness Level. And the expectation is that most of our research in a fundamental research centre like a Centre of Excellence kind of sits at that 2 or 3 technology readiness level. It's a bit of effort to get it to 4. 4 might be where we're at demonstrator level, just a little pilot or demonstrator. And our advisors in GETCO2 have informed us very strongly. Their expectation is that by the time we get to the end of this Centre of Excellence, we will have several technologies at TRL4, and they have also reinforced many, many, many times that if we get to TRL4, that's the inflection point at which more subsidies and fundings come in to help you take that technology readiness level 4 and really translate it and take it outside of the university and into usefulness for society. So that's really important. Technology licenses, if we protect our ideas, the expectation is that they won't just sit there as patents, but they will be licensed and used by somebody. So again, we have some key performance indicators associated with IP protection and licensing. There are current strategic funds in GETCO2 to assist us with all of these KPIs, and there is future funding, not just within GETCO2, but obviously linked to other cooperative research centres or other government funding, and that's part of this process and why we're all here as well. There is funding available if we demonstrate that our ideas have value. I promised you I would give you a definition of innovation. It is the practical application of new ideas and concepts into something of value in the marketplace. That could be a new product, a new service, a process, or even innovation in an organizational system or business. Publishing papers and research excellence is not innovation. Good science and excellence underpins innovation. I'm not diluting or downplaying the importance of the excellent science and all of those amazing papers that we publish. That's really important, but you cannot call it innovation if it does not hold value and somebody is not using it. Patenting as well, just like publications, is not innovation in and of itself. It's just invention. Ideas are ideas. You can protect novel ideas in patents, but did you know of all of the patents out there published, 98% of them ultimately don't become innovations because they don't end up in products. So publishing papers and patenting, putting those two things together, doesn't call you an innovator. You actually need to do the extra work and take the extra step beyond creativity, beyond screening your ideas. And I think this middle section here in the processing and screening and evaluation of ideas and generating assumptions and testing assumptions is really what we're talking about in the hackathon. We are going to request that you go out and interview people and talk to people, maybe people in policy, maybe people in the private sector, to pressure test your concepts and your assumptions and to test them. And then hopefully we won't necessarily have products or pilot plants out the other end of the hackathon, but we do expect that you might have a roadmap and a direction and a plan to get to innovation, to get to value for society out the other side of the hackathon. So I hope I've made that clear, and I hope you really do understand what innovation truly means before we kick off. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just doing an honest, warts and all reflection of some of the projects that we have innovated on and have really tried to translate our science and engineering into products. These days, here's a photo of my team at the University of Queensland in the School of Chemical Engineering. I'm a professor here. I've been at UQ. This is my 26th year. One of the innovations happened before I moved to UQ way back in 1999. But essentially my team, we work on the strong fundamental material science. Being in a chemical engineering school is great because we're pretty good at scale up and manufacturing. And the topics generally investigated in my team sort of are covered by sustainable and safe biomaterials and nanomaterials. That covers biomedical. It also covers sustainable materials, plant-based materials. And we have spent a bit of time working on novel nanomaterials and trying to commercialize them. Put those three things together, and I am confident that I can use the word innovation because I have done innovation and my team are locked on in terms of innovating and translating ideas that our team generates. And I reinforce the point, in order to do this, this is not a one-person show. We need diverse teams incorporating diversity of thought and diversity of operating styles and diversity of communication. And you put all those things together, the more diverse the team, the more powerful it is. And I have experienced that time and time and time again. That's why we're mixing you up in the hackathon. So rather than just talk about success, because I think failure is really important as well, how we can talk about the end point. Oh, I patented my ideas and they were licensed and they went into a startup company and it got commercialized. Great. Give us a clap. It's interesting to reflect how these things really started. And I want to spend more time talking about that very honestly and maybe less time clapping because we're all good at clapping and talking about how good we are. But maybe more importantly, let's open up and think about how some of these things began. So I've worked on a few different disparate technologies. Down the right-hand side, you can see that these things from the original experiments done in the lab through to some kind of translational event, they take decades. So that's point number one. If you're working on the sorts of things we do in GETCO2, this is not going to all happen in a couple of years. This will happen over the rest of this 7-year funding cycle. It will happen into the next, whatever it might be, funding cycle, and it will probably take something like a decade for our ideas and concepts to get out there. So I've worked on 3 and 1 in progress technologies, I guess I could say. The first one was an insulation for pacemaker leads. These materials were cracking and patients were dying. And so the pain point for this one was very real and very easy to understand. Stop the material that's insulating these pacemaker leads, which happened to be a thermoplastic polyurethane rubber. Stop it from cracking, save lives. And so that was my very first, that was my PhD and first postdoc, spreading over about 7 years. And I continued to be involved in that even after that work was done in Sydney. After moving from Sydney to UQ, I continued to work on that. But I'll talk about these separately as we move through. Second one was a nanotechnology, little ceramic synthetic clay platelets, 1 nanometer thick, maybe 30 nanometers in diameter, that could be at .something% mixed into hard plastics to give them transparency and scratch resistance. That technology became a startup company. It was sold in 2020. It was sold for a number much less than the $6.5 million invested, but it is out in automobiles, like rear tail lights of cars now. It is out in products, but it was not a blockbuster. The next one, which began in 2008 and is continuing, this is the one that involves traditional knowledge. You can see the logo there of Dugalingi Aboriginal Corporation up in northwest Queensland near Mount Isa in a little town called Camberwell. We cooperated and engaged with an Indigenous corporation. We took apart this weird desert grass, which is a symbol of a sacred symbol of resilience, covers 40% of our desert. I think most people know this spiky spinifex grass. After looking at lots of different applications, commodity applications, structure, construction materials, rubber reinforcement, all sorts of things, the one technology that ended up coming out of that desert grass derived nanocellulose platform technology was again a medical device, an injectable gel that could be potentially used for things like osteoarthritis and cosmetic surgery. That one is now in a startup company called Toyota Medical, invested by UniSeed and UniSuper, and that is in progress. They are basically in large animal trials in China, I believe, this year, and it's doing really, really well. That's number 3. Number 4 is again a plant-based water holding gel for soil and farms to deal with climate variation. I'm not going to speak too much about that because later in your curriculum, you'll hear from one of our partner investigators, early career researchers, Dr. Hema Haridavan. You'll hear more from her about her involvement in commercial accelerators and her efforts, which are ongoing every day today to translate and commercialize this technology out there into farming and growing type applications. So just quickly, how did these things begin? We can all clap and make a big noise about this polyurethane, biostable polyurethane. Today, it's out in something like 100 million people inside their bodies. We can celebrate that. I feel great about that. But I wanted to talk more about how did it actually start, because you might be surprised to hear for some of these things how they started. And yes, there's been a long, tortuous path. That material ended up in one of the biggest pacemaker lead companies, St. Jude Medical, and St. Jude Medical were purchased by an even bigger medical device company in 2017, Abbott Medical. And the numbers when you start talking about medical device technologies are not small. That was a $25 billion purchase. And with that purchase went our technology into all of the Abbott pacemakers and defibrillators. So yeah, big numbers, but humble beginnings. So the real story is, how did it start? How did it start? There was a little Australian pacemaker lead company called Telectronics Pacing Systems in Lane Cove in Sydney. They contacted some researchers at the University of New South Wales Biomedical Engineering and some other researchers at CSIRO. They got a very small, it probably was a $100,000 grant back in the late 80s to begin some work on, we've got a problem. The current insulation materials are cracking, people are dying, we need to do something about it. That then grew into one of the very first, actually, cooperative research centres in Australia, the CRC for cardiac technology, which spanned the best part of a decade. And more partnerships came on board after that. I was involved as a PhD student and a postdoc. So my PhD was at UTS in material science. And then the postdoc, I was actually running the animal trials at the University of New South Wales Biomedical Engineering. And as an early career researcher in my first postdoc based at University of New South Wales, I was part of the team pitching to get that very first investment into this commercialization of this biostable polyurethane. The aim did not change. It was a very simple aim: to produce more biostable, soft, transparent, thermoplastic polyurethane rubber formulations with adequate mechanical performance. That did not change for the whole time we were working, and it was a very big team, very big multidisciplinary team. Much later on, you know, way more than almost a decade and a half, a Scottish heart valve company licensed the technology. They paid $20 million Australian for it back in 2001. And then they were bought, or that technology was bought by St. Jude Medical. And then, of course, St. Jude Medical was acquired by Abbott in 2017. So these things, they take a long time and they can have very tortuous and weird paths. But what I wanted to impress upon you was that industry made a phone call and contacted some researchers in Sydney because they had a problem. And that is how it started. And so just as we are here now sitting in GETCO2, and I'm the chair of the engagement and partnerships team, we get these kind of inquiries all the time. And why can't that be any different to what happened back in the late 80s for this very successful technology? We're right here, right now. So we need to be alert and awake when someone from industry contacts us and says, we have a problem, can we work together? We need to be ready and have the tools in order to take that forward, because you never know what can happen. The second one, just briefly, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, I mentioned a nanotechnology. We formed a startup company back in the, well, the research started in the year 2000. I arrived at UQ from Sydney. I moved up here in 1999, and I began working on nanotechnology as applied to polymer reinforcement. I think it was about 2006, we formed a startup company, Tenacitech, but what I wanted to talk about here was how did it actually start? And I think on the next slide we have that. I'd moved from Sydney to UQ. I had a few PhD students. I had a very small team. As an early career researcher, I was really trying to build my team out and have that feeling of building a multidisciplinary team again. I'd had the success with the pacemaker leads, and I really wanted to build a team and do my next stage innovation, I suppose. I had some small research grants, but I really needed some more funding, and had a few conversations with UniQuest. We'd done a little bit of work in the lab on these nanotech synthetic clays. We were getting some good results, and I did a very clever thing and engaged with UniQuest, the tech transfer office and commercialization company of the University of Queensland, and we got our first provisional patent. That was a really smart thing to do because it was a valuable piece of intellectual property. In 2006, through our contacts in UniQuest, we were invited to give a pitch, just as you will be doing at the end of the year. And we pitched into a small enterprise competition, the 2006 Queensland Enterprise Competition. And lo and behold, we won one of the prizes. Small iLab prize. It was only $500,000, but that gave us pre-seed funding, and we founded our startup company, Tenacitech Proprietary Limited, in 2007, the year after, and we were on our way. We started engaging with industry, and it was good to have that funding at that time in my very early career here at UQ. Fast forward to not that long ago, 2020, our company was sold, and all of the intellectual property was licensed and sold to a multinational plastics compounder who was a particular expert in additives and nano additives, and they bought our company. They paid less than the amount of money that had been invested in us, which was about $6.5 million. I think they paid a number less than that. That's okay. It wasn't a blockbuster. But I guess what I wanted to share with you quite honestly here was that the experience taught me and my team, trained a lot of people. And even though it was not considered a blockbuster or a commercial success, it was still a very valuable experience. And it was very valuable to the university. It was very valuable to a lot of different people and stakeholders involved. So I wanted to share on the next slide was nobody thinks of Tenacitech as a big success. But this is a lot of money. There were a lot of people employed for that $6.5 million. We ran scale-up trials in Japan, Europe, North America, France, and all of those experiences and that business development stays with me, and it's in my toolbox for whatever happens next. We did win ARC grants. We won a very large NHMRC grant on toxicology of nanomaterials. That was a very important problem that we had to solve. We got money from Queensland State Government, UniQuest, ANSI, and so $3.2 million worth of research happened and came into the University of Queensland as a result of this startup company. The university also got behind us and invested $1.3 million of infrastructure support. Now that pilot facility now sits out at our Long Pocket campus. You can see it down here in the bottom right-hand corner, and that's there for everybody in the university to use. There were some KPIs here that are, publishing's important. So I'm not going to read through them all, but there were a lot of beautiful science was done. We cooperated with the federal government on new policy settings for nano health and safety and occupational hygiene. Engineers Australia Nanotechnology Panel, we contributed to policy change there because people were very concerned about the impact of nanotechnology and nanomaterials on health and safety. And so we did a lot of work in that space. And now it makes its way into the teaching. I teach a biomaterials course, I teach an innovation course, and all of those learnings pop up in the curriculum of the undergraduate and postgraduate students that I teach these days. We employed a lot of people. We employed 9 of the people listed here. For those working at chemical engineering, you would know perhaps Grant Edwards. You might know Dr. Celine Chalier. You might know Michael Murphy. And then you've got other people like Anthony, who's now a CEO of his own startup company called Orthotic in sustainable materials, and so on. And so it's not just about success, it's about all of these training and mentoring and preparing people for their careers. We trained 14 PhD students as part of that startup company. Again, not going to go through all the names. And we produced some really heavy-hitting science. And probably the work that I'm most proud of is understanding the protein coronas that form around nanomaterials and really understanding biological interactions to prove that these nanomaterials are safe and they're cleared out of the body. You may not expect that of basically a materials engineering startup company, but it forced us to go and answer these questions, because without answering these questions and doing the science, we would not have been able to get our ideas and our technologies and innovate and get them out of the university. So I'm very proud of that work, even though it's not considered a commercial success. And here's just a small tasting plate of companies that we ran commercial trials with all over the world, ranging from polymers and chemicals, high-performance additives, electronics, engineering products, sports. I'm a keen golfer, and we got to work with all of the main golf ball manufacturers in the world. That was a bit of an enjoyable experience for me. And of course, the medical ones you can see here down the right-hand side. So all of these companies I have sat in boardrooms and run trials with in my life. If you're interested in hearing a little bit more about a reflection on this startup company, we do a lot of co-teaching with Cameron Turner. Used to work for UniQuest. He's now a professor in the UQ Business School. I did an interview with Cameron last year, and if you click on the YouTube link there, you can hear a little bit more about a fuller reflection of that particular experience, translational experience, which is, I tried to be as honest as possible about the take-homes from that experience. So have a click on that and have a listen if you've got a few minutes spare. This one very quickly, this was the Spinifex grass, the deep cooperation with traditional owners and traditional knowledge. Who'd have thought that we work on this spiky desert grass? The beginning of this one was a phone call from an anthropologist / architect, Professor Paul Memmott at UQ. I had a handset on my desk at that time. He said, "Hey, Darren, you don't know me. We're applying for an ARC grant on traditional knowledge meets modern material science on this spiky desert grass called Spinifex. Have you heard of Spinifex?" Yes, I was born in the country, and I have certainly had Spinifex spike my legs walking through the desert. And that was the beginning. It was a phone call from an anthropologist, and we wrote the ARC grant, and we were awarded 5 years of funding. And after or during that project, a very strong and amazing collaboration with Dugalungi Aboriginal Corporation was struck, and we did lots of engineering and lots of science and looked at lots of applications. And at the end of the day, the second I guess, interaction that was pivotal in that translational project was a chance meeting with this fellow up in the top right-hand corner here, Ian Griffiths. I had known Ian Griffiths because together we worked on the pacemaker lead materials. Ian was CEO of Aortec Biomaterials, the second stage of that polyurethanes adventure into the pacemakers. Ian is someone I had admired because it just seemed everything translational that he had a hand in turned into success. And unbeknownst to me, Ian had moved from Melbourne to Brisbane and was running the ANNF, the nanotechnology infrastructure across the whole of Australia. So I called up Ian and I said, "Hey, mate, can we have a coffee? I'm working on something that might have medical applications, but I need to sound off with you. I need your advice." So I brought a little sample of the gel, sat down for coffee at the AIBN, and struck up a conversation with Ian. And I said, look at this gel. I have a feeling that there might be something in wound dressings, or I really feel like this could have medical applications. What do you think? And Ian looked me in the eye and he said, can you inject it through a 30 gauge needle? I said, I think it'll be shear thinning. These little nanofibers, I think, will line up and they'll shoot through the needle. Went back to the lab, tested it. Of course, it was beautiful to inject, but then once the little nanofibers came out the other end of the needle, they set up a gel, and they had some really quite amazing mechanical integrity as a gel. And these sorts of things have a lot of value in medicine. I do know that. And so that was the beginning of an invention. You can see Darren Martin and Ian Griffiths, inventors on a University of Queensland patent, which is also featuring Dugalungi Aboriginal Corporation. I have a great sadness that Ian passed away about 4 years ago. He's about the same age as me. He would have been about the same age as me, 55 this year. And so I really miss him, but I have very fond memories of that conversation, because it's just sometimes one conversation can lead to an invention and can lead to a startup company. That's how it happens. I'll leave this one, the water holding gel for agriculture and growing media. You can see this stuff we make without water, and it swells up and it holds lots of water, and it's made from plant material like crop residues or industrial cellulose waste. Heem is going to come and tell you all about this at the midpoint of your curriculum during the next coming months. So enough about that. I just wanted to share some of those experiences with all you hackers. And now, so what are we actually going to be doing? Well, formally, the curriculum kicks off on the 26th of August. It's not so far away. We're going to have an induction and an open question and answer session on innovation and entrepreneurship. Why should we even bother? Involving people like UniQuest and early stage investors in that first session. We are going to give you a little document, very simple document called a team charter, which will get you to write down all your team members and how you're going to communicate together, how you're going to agree to work together. We find that is a really useful thing to do in accelerators and hackathons and these sorts of things. And we'll start the brainstorming, although I do note that some teams have already been doing quite a bit of brainstorming. So we will continue the brainstorming in that first session. Early September, number 2, talk a little bit about the power of transdisciplinary teams, and of course that includes diversity, business modeling, and human-centered design. We'll introduce you to the useful tools that are typically employed in accelerators and hackathons, which I think you will find, if you know how to use these business modeling tools, you will carry them with you for your whole career. You'll be able to speak the language of value proposition. You will be able to look industry partners in the eye and talk the language of translation. And I think that will be a very valuable thing for your career. There'll be homework. The blue lists the homework, starting to have a closer look at these tools, the value proposition canvas and the business model canvas, and starting to plug in some little post-it notes and starting to form your assumptions and your concepts a little bit more formally. Late September, number 3, hackathon session number 3, how to present a successful pitch. I think that's, we can all do with a bit of that. I will be trying to attend and learn. I'm always trying to learn how to give a better pitch. That's part A, and then part B, from hackathon to net zero. You will be hearing from a couple of graduates, from chemical engineering graduates from ChemEng at UQ, Vishnu and Geraldine, who only just a few years ago have set up a company, Louis Software, that basically have an amazing techno-economic software package. They went out into industry, worked in wastewater, got very frustrated with working on spreadsheets. They said there must be a better way. They had the guts to get funding and form their own startup company, and they are now making money and doing really well. The reason they would like to come and talk to GETCO2 is that they're finding that their software has a particular niche and a particular utility for the sorts of things like we do in GetCO2. So I think you'll find that really useful. Again, homework here. We're really encouraging you to not just use the business modeling tools by putting things down on paper. We want you to get out of the university and to and interviews with real humans out of university. So one of your texts is a book called Talking to Humans. And we do expect you and your teams to develop the confidence to go out and test your assumptions and have those conversations and bring them back into your what will be your final pitch. Mid-November, we've allocated a whole day to spend face-to-face time with your mentors. I should have added that all of the sessions leading up to the mid-November sessions will be done online on Teams. But 17th and 18th of November, you'll all be there in person. In person is so much better. But you will have time with your mentors on the 17th to prepare your final pitch, to get that coaching and mentoring. And then the 18th of November, you will be pitching. And I think that evening is the conference dinner. And there will be, I mean, pretty much every child gets a prize in this hackathon. So there will be lots of prizes and awards and lots of loud applause and hopefully a great celebration on the 18th of November. The inspiration, and I know you guys have looked at these papers. We had the original inspiration for this hackathon when we were deciding what challenge we should issue to the hackathon teams. There were these two papers co-authored by people in our centre. One of them was about some of the, I guess, the hurdles in terms of value chain and materials. Material needs for power-to-X systems for CO2 utilization to get us to that gigawatt scale. That was one inspirational piece. And then the other inspirational piece was a paper that Tom Rufford found that speaks the language of scale-up. And I think this paper does a really good job of articulating scale-up and gives it some structure and is very appropriate for the sorts of things we do in GetCO2. So if you put those two papers together, that's very much scene setting. In terms of the texts that we highly recommend, the Osterwalder and Pinure texts on business model canvas and value proposition canvas, the Strategizer books, I think people know them as. These are the most respected tools for Lean Launchpad, which is kind of the way people put together business plans in 2025. Forget about sitting at a desk and writing a business plan with a marketing plan and a financial plan and that kind of thing. No, this is how startups are formed. This is how people do it these days, and this is the most respected text reference for people doing this the world over. The other book here was recommended heavily by Cameron Turner in our business school here at UQ, and it's Talking to Humans. Success starts with understanding your customers. So that's another read that we expect you and your team members to take the time, have a cup of coffee and digest this material. And bring back questions for us and your mentors if there are things that you're struggling to understand. How are we going to assess the teams? So there will be 50 marks allocated to each pitch, each concept that is presented at the final GetCO2 conference. Of those 50 marks, 20 of those marks will be allocated to broadly technical and innovation. Remember, you know what innovation means now. So it's not just ideas, it's not just patents, it's not publications, it's value for somebody. Have you clearly demonstrated the potential disruption and impact of your proposed innovation in terms of enabling the future of sustainable gigawatt scale manufacturing and deployment of power-to-X CO2 electrolyzers? And there's a few sub things here to frame your thinking. These might be things that you would like to consider, you and your team might like to consider to cover off on that 20 marks available for technical and innovation. There will be 10 marks allocated to a strong value proposition. What is a value proposition? It's benchmarking against other things. It's clearly articulating why your solution is so compelling. It definitely holds that word value, which means someone out there is going to be willing to pay for this. And we'll teach you as we go through the curriculum how to frame and how to write a strong value proposition. This little table here I find really useful because we'll be working through the why. Why should we do this? Why is it important? Why is your concept or your idea? How do you communicate that to a general audience or an audience of investors? How? Talking more about your solution, the validation, and the sorts of language that you might like to use. And then there might be a bit of forward planning about how are we going to get our ideas out of the university? What's our roadmap? So these are the sorts of things that we'll be expecting. There will be another 10 marks for collaboration. This is one of our massive KPIs in GetCO2. There will be 10 marks available for how you collaborate, connect, and engage. Now, that is both how has your team fostered positive new cross-node interaction and collaboration within the Centre of Excellence, but also, and probably just as important, how has your team established communication, engagement, and new insights through engagement with new entities or stakeholders external to GetCO2. That could be public, that could be policy and government, and of course, that could be private sector and engaging with people, stakeholders who might be interested in electrochemical conversion of CO2 into valuable chemicals. Go talk to people, have a conversation. Those interviews can be highly valuable. And the last of the 10 of 50 marks are, of course, for crisp, clean science communication. Has your team delivered a concise and captivating and energetic pitch that is enthusiastic and persuasive and can be readily understood by both domain experts and non-experts present in the audience? Have you developed a marketable team name, team logo, and tagline? I note that all of the teams or some of the teams already have names. My expectation is that your team name and associated tagline will change from now until the end. And maybe you've got a really artistic person on your team who's particularly good at generating logos that will be very memorable for those in the audience in mid-November. Everybody's good at something. Nobody's good at everything. So part of this is deciding who on your team will take on which parts of the hackathon challenge. Expectations, just to finish. Firstly, this is not an exam. It's a curriculum, it's a training experience, it's supposed to be a rich learning experience, and it's supposed to be fun. It's really just designed to get our brains out of our normal technical, engineering, academic space and push them into an to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable, to push us into a different thinking space and challenge our perspectives and challenge our assumptions. If you cooperate within your teams and put in a sincere, genuine effort, I honestly believe you will gain a lot out of the hackathon. And I just need to reiterate that a lot of people within GetCO2 and a lot of volunteers, speakers, mentors, and judges are donating their time for free for you, significant time and expertise. So please respect that and engage in the program with an open and positive mindset and a lot of energy. And I think you'll get a lot out of it. And I know the individuals in our teams will do that. One important point, and I do run a postgraduate course with 140 people that form teams of 5, and we run them through a very similar curriculum, and your teams will not always agree on things. You will disagree on the direction that your team is heading. Use the team charter that we'll be providing you as a baseline to kind of work together respectfully. And also be aware that they talk about this forming, storming, norming, and performing. Forming's all happy and smiley at the beginning. Storming's where we have differences of opinions and we learn how to respectfully listen to our teammates and arrive at a mutual agreement about where our team is heading. That can be a bit rough. It's part of the learning. Then we get to the norming, I guess, with a few weeks to go, heading into your pitch, and you all hopefully will jump on the same page and be, yes, we are team X and we know where we're heading. And then performing, of course, the pitch will be your final performance. And we're so much looking forward to that. That is all part of the hackathon journey. Our 5 mentors are all super high caliber people who've worked in the private sector, who've built companies and commercialized things, all of them, with a wealth of experience in innovation and translation. So they're also very busy people. So we would ask you to please make very efficient use of their valuable time. And just recommending, maybe your mentors will be very generous and give you more time than this. I would not expect that they would have more than about an hour per fortnight to spend with you. So prepare for those meetings with your mentor and make the most of that 1 hour. Bring your questions, do some preparation so that every minute that you spend with your mentors is used efficiently. Now we get to the fun part where we actually are going to do a draw and assign mentors. So who are our mentors? We've got 2 PhDs from Woodside over in Western Australia, both chemical engineers, Sahil and Boone. They're very enthusiastic about becoming part of this hackathon, and I know that they are going to do a great job as mentors. We've got Lee Staines. She is the RTCM Trailblazer Accelerator Industry Advisor for a massive minerals trailblazer based here at UQ. She worked many years in Rio Tinto, has amazing translational experience, and so she will bring great mentoring capability. We've got KC Chan, who ran the Cooperative Research Centre for CO2 conversion, who I believe collaborate quite closely with GETCO2. So very knowledgeable in this domain space and very, very knowledgeable in translation. Another great person. And then finally, Leanne Bond, a NATSI fellow. I think she's the president of the Queensland division of the Academy of Technology, Science and Engineering. She's again a chemical engineer with over 30 years corporate experience in developing so many businesses you would lose count across a very broad range of industrial sectors, a lot of it in oil and gas and resources and that sort of thing. Okay, we have our teams 1 to 5 there. Some have names, some are yet to develop names. So what I'm going to do now is, in order that I draw the numbers 1 to 5, we'll go through the mentors and assign the teams. So I've got scrunched up little pieces of paper. The very first number I pull out, and I'm going to set these on my table in order. Team 2, Cell Use Stack. You are going to have Sahil as your mentor, because you're the first one I drew out. Team 1 is the second one that I draw out. So Team 1, the CO2 Verters, you are going to have Boone from Woodside as your mentor. Great. Who's next? Team 5, the Alchemists. You are going to have Lee as your mentor. That leaves 4 and 3. Team 4, you are going to have KC as your mentor, which means Team 3, Team Tanika, are going to have Leanne as your mentor. I will leave those numbers and I will not disrupt that order, and we will set that in concrete. I think that was the fairest way to do it. So mentors, check. They have been assigned. And that leaves me with only one thing to do, and that is to acknowledge all of the people who have supported this. First, GETCO2 Hackathon. I would really like to express my gratitude to Anna and the whole GETCO2 support team, who have done a lot of things. They always do a lot of things in the background, and it's one of the best supporting teams of a big research center that I've ever had the privilege of working with, and they continue to do amazing things for GetCO2. I'd like to thank Christian, my co-director of the engagement portfolio, for his assistance and early on in shaping how this should look. I am not an electrochemist, and I'm really relied on some very, very smart advice from Tom Rufford and Simon Smart early on in shaping the event. One of the really clever things was they suggested running this in the spirit of how the Chemica Hackathon has been run every year, and they connected me with Professor Sandra Kentish down at in Melbourne. And Sandra also, thank you, Sandra, shared 2 big folders of how they run the Chemica hackathons, and we've kind of used those for inspiration. We've ended up in a very, very different place, in a very different hackathon, but those materials were really helpful for me to figure out how to write assessment rubrics and that sort of thing. And also, we've had many discussions within the GetCO2 engagement and partnerships portfolio team. A lot of feedback along the way in making this happen. So thank you. Of course, you're all going to get one of these amazing, beautiful hoodies, bare minimum, but I think there'll be more prizes than that once we get out the other side. I'll finish there, and I've got to make sure that I save this so that you can watch it. Stop sharing. Stop recording. Stop.